video is on the subject of paedophilia, and I'm going to try to explore some issues relating to paedophilia in the BBC and also in government. At the end of the video, I would like you to vote on the recommendations which I'm going to make. The item most in the news this week was Jimmy Savile. And if you're listening from the USA, you might not know who Jimmy Savile was, so I'll just tell you briefly. Jimmy Savile was very well known in the 60s, 70s and 80s as a DJ. He was famous for his role in Top of the Pops and also for a programme called Jim'll Fix It. And Jim'll Fix It was quite a good idea, really. It was a programme in which young children would realise their dreams. If, for example, they wanted to become a princess for a day, Jim would fix it for them. At the time, I thought the programme was quite a good idea, but I thought that Jimmy Savile was extremely weird. I didn't really like him very much, and I didn't think he was very talented, although the programme was a good idea. At the same time, David Icke, it has to be said, was stating way back in the 90s that Jimmy Savile was a paedophile. And it turns out that David Icke was right. Now, last night they were going to put on a programme on Newsnight. There was a lot of talk about it in the press, and the internet was awash with rumours about who it was that was going to be outed in the government, because up till now the press talk has concentrated on the BBC. Well, I listened to the Newsnight programme last night, and I would say that we learned absolutely nothing. We learned that it was a senior Tory politician, that's all, and nothing more. And I'd like to speculate as to the reasons why Newsnight didn't divulge what they advertised they were going to be divulging. And I think the reason would be either possibly because we have the strictest libel laws in the world, in Great Britain, and that those libel laws are protecting paedophiles and exposing our children to the dangers of paedophiles, or the other possibility is that the BBC was rather fed up with being the centre for press speculation, and they were aware of the fact that there are just as many paedophiles, if not more, in government, so they were giving a warning shot across the bows to government that if they didn't stop speculating about the BBC, there were lots of skeletons in the cupboard that could be unearthed. One indication that it was a shot across the bows is that the programme ended rather abruptly and was immediately followed by another programme on the MP's expenses saga. I think that the BBC were making the point very clearly to the government that if they pursued the line they were pursuing of focusing attention on paedophilia at the BBC rather than paedophilia in the government, then the focus could very easily be changed to the government itself. So it was a way of stopping the accusations being put out against employees at the BBC by simply saying, look, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. As you can see, there are lots of photos available on the internet of MPs, royalty, and even the Pope seen with Jimmy Savile. Of course, the fact that these people are seen with Jimmy Savile does not mean that they are necessarily paedophiles. Jimmy Savile was known to have spent, I think, 11 Christmases with Mrs. Thatcher. He was frequently seen at Highgrove. But of course this does not necessarily mean that these people knew that he was a paedophile. The relationship between Edward Heath, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, and Jimmy Savile is particularly interesting. A long time ago, way back in the 1990s, David Icke pointed the finger at Edward Heath and said in one of his books that he was not only a paedophile but also a child murderer. When I first heard this, I thought it was really a bit far-fetched. I couldn't believe that that could be possible of one of our prime ministers. But I'm not so sure now, and you'll learn why if you listen to the rest of this video. Apparently, when David Icke made the accusation, a reporter telephoned Heath, because he was still alive at the time, and read out what David Icke had written. And Heath, of course, just made the comment, oh, well, he's mad, and didn't do anything about it. And what I think about this is that David Icke would not have wanted to make a statement like that unless he felt he had some proof and was prepared to face a libel action from Edward Heath. Now, it's very interesting that Heath was supposed to have shown a strong interest in a school in Jersey called Eau de la Garenne. It was a care home for Jersey children. Apparently, Saville visited the home regularly. He denied it, but there's photographic evidence that he actually was there. And it's alleged that Saville was a procurer of children for the rich and famous to abuse. It is alleged that Heath took boys on the pretext of giving them experience of sailing onto his boat, the Morning Cloud, and that he abused them there. According to this article, which I'm going to show you, Heath was warned on 4 occasions by the head of the Metropolitan Police not to loiter in London's lavatories and not to try to pick up young boys. Now, I absolutely don't know whether that is true, but I think it should be investigated, even though Heath is now dead. If you look at this photo, it is supposed to have been taken in Eau de la Garenne. And again, I don't know that it was taken there, but that's what we're told. And it does seem strange because Heath is there with Richard Nixon, as you can see, planting a tree in the grounds. So why would he have taken an American president to this home for boys in Jersey? It seems really bizarre. And I think we need to investigate it, whether or not Heath is dead, because this is an illustration of the dangers of having our politicians involved in this kind of thing. The NSPCC says that over 100,000 children in Britain disappear every year, which is quite an incredible statistic if you think about it. And children at Eau de la Garenne are supposed to have just disappeared. It's not just in Jersey that happens. At the moment, there is quite an incredible court action which has been started. I think it was started in July and it's still going on. The lawsuit is brought by Jason Bowman of the ACP, that's the Association of Citizen Prosecutors, and Reverend Kevin Annett of the ITCCS, which is the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. And obviously these organisations are not official organisations. They have been formed by citizens, that's quite clear. But it seems as though the court action is an actual court action that is currently going on. It announces the first class action lawsuit in Canadian history to name as co-defendants the Vatican, the Crown of England, Canada and its churches, and big pharmaceutical companies, all of which are accused of crimes against humanity and criminal conspiracy. The lawsuit is brought by, I've already said, I think. The lawsuit will be explained in detail at a press conference held on the date of filing at the Federal Court building on Wednesday, July the 4th. And it appears that this is about a school for Indians on a reservation where I think 50% of the children simply disappeared, and it is alleged that there were murders that took place and that the children were abused. Whether that is true, of course, we don't know. The surprising thing, of course, is that the mainstream media in the UK is not telling us anything about this at all, even though the Queen of England is one of the co-defendants. Of course, if this turns out to be true, it would amount to a genocide of the Indian natives. And the comment that I would make is that that would fit in with Agenda 21, because Agenda 21 is all about acquiring the wildlands for the enjoyment of the super wealthy, and the Indians are in the way there. Now, I mentioned earlier that the allegations against Edward Heath, former Prime Minister of the UK, are that he abused boys from this school called Eau de la Garenne, and also that he is supposed to have murdered children as part of a satanic ritual sacrifice. Now, I have to say, when I first heard about these, the fact that the rich and the influential were into Satanism and child sacrifice, I just didn't believe it. But I've since changed my mind, or I've begun to change my mind. I'm still not absolutely certain, but it does seem to me that there's a very strong likelihood that this is actually true. First of all, there were the remains of children found at Eau de la Garenne, and I don't think the police pursued it very much, but there certainly was evidence and a great deal of suspicion that children had been murdered there, and they found underground passages as well, and shackles covered in blood, that kind of thing. So where's the evidence, you may ask? Well, it seems a little bit of a coincidence that very close to the site of Eau de la Garenne, the school that I've been talking about, is a place called the Neolithic Passage Grave, which is a site for ritual child sacrifice, and that's apparently a few hundred meters away from Eau de la Garenne. Now again, I read on the internet that there is a great deal of Satanism in Jersey, and I've never been there. So I was a bit sceptical about that, because obviously there's no evidence of that. They say there are a lot of satanic statues, that kind of thing, in gardens, and I just wasn't sure whether it was true or not. But then I listened to a video by Bill Maloney, who apparently was himself brought up in a care home and felt very strongly about what has happened in Eau de la Garenne, decided to do an investigation into it, and the film that he put up, which is called Sun, Sea and Satan, was so remarkable. I really do think it's one of the most incredible things I've seen on the internet. And I'm going to show you some stills. He took a moving, it was a video, but he showed satanic statues in a garden high up next to a house overlooking the main road. And what I'm going to show you is really quite remarkable. The fact that the authorities have allowed this, and they seem to be doing nothing about it. Now, the first day that he went past, they showed this, what I'm putting on the screen now, and that is the statue of a child having oral sex, and a baby at the side with its backside facing the road. There was an eagle and a chimpanzee on the tree. And when he went back later, it was almost as though the occupants of the house, and you can see it's quite an ordinary house, the occupants of the house seemed to be almost cocking a snook at him, as though they had seen him taking video of the statues, and they had turned the baby round, and you can see what I've just put on the screen here, which really is unbelievable that is allowed on a main road in Jersey. And then the following day, it was the following day, he went back and he found that the child, the owner of the house had put pigtails on the child so that it was obviously meant to depict a little girl having oral sex. And again, I just find this absolutely remarkable. There is no sex offenders register apparently in Jersey, and I'm going to show you also what Bill Maloney showed, and that is the statue of a devil. I think it was in some kind of local wild area, and it quite clearly is the devil, and it quite clearly has cost a lot of money. So that has been done almost on an official basis. Now, the Queen is the person who is responsible for everything that happens in Jersey, and really nothing has been done about these statues, which I think should not be there. Paedophilia scandals seem to be increasing. There was the Franklin scandal, which took place in the United States, involving a school at, I think it was called Boys Town, and some very high-profile politicians were named in that. There has been a scandal in Belgium recently, and of course we've now got the Jimmy Savile scandal in Great Britain. And I want to connect these scandals with the type of behaviour that goes on every year in the United States. Every year there is a meeting at Bohemian Grove, and it's a meeting of the high-profile leaders of industry, politicians, newspaper magnates, that kind of person. The same type of people, and very often exactly the same people as we see in the Bilderberg meetings. The Bohemian Grove meeting takes place over a period of about a week in a Californian redwood forest. But Bohemian Grove is particularly well known for the ceremony that takes place there every year, which is called the Cremation of Care. And in this ceremony, the leaders of the Western world, people known to have attended are Bush, Reagan, Nixon. Practically all the presidents have attended Bohemian Grove, and what they actually do during this Cremation of Care ceremony is they have a mock sacrifice of a child. It's a satanic ritual sacrifice to the huge stone owl, which is called Moloch. When I say that it's a mock sacrifice, that is what we assume to be the case, but there have been witnesses who have claimed to have seen children actually being killed there. And of course we would never know, because this is private property and ordinary people cannot go there and cannot therefore find any evidence to suggest that there have been ritual killings actually taken place there. So we simply don't know. I'm just going to give you a view of the ceremony which takes place. It was a film which was taken by Alex Jones, who famously went into the grove without being found.
Begone, dull care. Fire shall have its will of thee. Begone, dull care. And all the winds, they bury with thy ducks. Hail, fellowship's eternal flame. Once again, midsummer sets us free.
There you see the funeral pyre burning with the effigy of a human, or it could be real, ladies and gentlemen. There's been a lot of strange going-ons in that area of Northern California, but this is what the establishment is into right here in America, the Cremation of Care. And this was July 15th, 2000.
Now, there are those people, I've heard people that live locally near the forest saying that there's no harm in what's going on because these are people with responsible jobs and they need to let their hair down. And my response to that is to ask you whether, if you found that teachers at your local high school were behaving in that way, would you be happy to send your child to that school? I think the answer is probably no. So what can we do about these perverts who are governing the world, I think it's fair to say? Well, I've got a few suggestions, and what I'd like you to do, as I said at the beginning of this video, is to vote. If you agree with my suggestions, please click like. If you don't agree with them, please click dislike. And what I'd like this video to become is an indicator to the establishment, the governing establishment, and the establishment elite that up with this we will not put, that we want to see an end to this, and we want them to take action and stop trying to brush all of this under the carpet. It's far too important for the children of the world that we do something about it, and we, the ordinary people, need to do something about it. My first suggestion is that we should change the libel laws in this country. The person who brings an action for libel is in a very, very advantageous position, because unlike any other law, the plaintiff has special privileges because they consider that every man has a right to keep his good reputation. And because of this, the burden of proof falls on the defendant to the libel case, that is, the person who is supposed to have done the defaming. And that means that that person has to prove, absolutely prove, that what he or she says about the person libelled is true. And if you can't prove that, you cannot win a libel case. This law is not for ordinary people. Ordinary people, the government doesn't give a damn whether ordinary people are libelled or not. They can't bring actions for libel because they simply don't have the funds to do so. And so it is a law which is there purely for the wealthy and privileged classes. It is not there for ordinary people. But the important thing about the libel law is that it is protecting paedophiles, and it is destroying, therefore, the lives of ordinary children. And for this reason, it has to go. Now, I'm not suggesting that we give people the right to destroy the reputation of famous people just like that. What I'm suggesting is that the libel law be reframed so that it is just like any other law, and the plaintiff has to prove on the balance of probabilities that what the defendant said was not true. The second thing I would like to see happening is an end to D-notices. After Operation Or, which was an undercover operation in which paedophiles were discovered having downloaded child pornography from the internet, there were a lot of people caught in that trap. And apparently Tony Blair issued a D-notice to prevent politicians from being brought to justice. He claimed national security was a reason for not following them up. And that is absolutely outrageous. It should not be allowed to happen. If a politician issues a D-notice, he should give the people detailed reasons why it is necessary to do so. The third action should be to stop judges having the power to lock away papers relating to any legal case for long periods of time. And in support of that, I'm just going to read you this article. Blair was leader of the Labour Party at the time of the mass killing of children by known paedophile Thomas Hamilton, who walked into Dunblane Primary School in Scotland in 1996 and shot dead 16 children and a teacher before killing himself. Hamilton, like Saville, was a procurer of children for pillars of the establishment. Scottish Judge Lord Cullen was appointed to head the official inquiry into Dunblane, and he ordered that significant documents relating to the case should be locked away from public view for 100 years. He said that this was to protect the victims and families when anyone with a brain could see that it was to protect the establishment. The fourth action should be to force politicians to be CRB checked. That means that they should have checks done against their names on the Criminal Records Bureau. Teachers are checked on an annual basis, and I really don't see why MPs should not be checked. That sort of thing would have prevented Heath, for example, from becoming Prime Minister if it is true that he was caught cottaging young boys in public lavatories. So I think that it's not a fail-safe method of ensuring that paedophiles do not get into positions of power, but it is better than nothing. Another thing which clearly needs to stop is the practice of, when an inquiry is set up, of having terms of reference for that inquiry, which limit the scope of the inquiry. So, for example, if you look at the first Newsnight programme, the one that caused all the kerfuffle, then you can see that the terms of reference involved slicing up the information rather like you slice a cucumber, and you can take the cucumber and just take a little tiny part of it, leaving all the rest. So what they did was they said, well, what we're going to look into is we're going to look into whether Newsnight decided to ditch the programme that it was going to air on the subject of Saville and paedophilia because it had two laudatory programmes in which Saville was going to be praised that were due to be aired at Christmas time. So did it stop the original Newsnight programme because of these two other programmes? That is the terms of reference that the BBC has set up. So what is it not going to look at? Well, it's not going to look at the practice of paedophilia either in the past or at present at the BBC. And that's fairly typical of what goes on. You know, limiting the information. You had the same thing happen with the David Kelly investigation. That the scope of that, I believe, was limited as well. There's going to be another inquiry as well, but that's yet another example of slicing up the information as you slice a cucumber. So this one, and I'm quoting from the article I read in the Times, it says, Dame Janet Smith, a former Court of Appeal judge, is leading a separate inquiry expected to take longer into the culture and practices at the BBC in the years Saville worked there. So nothing to do with the culture at the moment, nothing to do with any possible paedophilia at the moment, nothing to do with possible paedophilia in government circles, just the BBC. So the information is limited, it's curtailed, and an investigation, a public inquiry, should not be curtailed. And of course, while all these shenanigans are going on, while they're curtailing inquiries, while they're slapping D-notices on information, while they're locking information away for 100 years, all the sheeple here, because they're only sort of paying a little bit of attention, not really much attention at all the sheeple here is that there's going to be an inquiry, and so they think, oh, that's okay then, don't need to worry about that, it's all going to be sorted out with the inquiry. I think not. And my final recommendation is summed up by the saying which we have in England. I don't know whether it exists in America and Australia as a saying, that the devil finds work for idle hands. Basically meaning that if somebody has absolutely nothing to do and they don't have work to keep them occupied, then they can get into mischief. I think this is very true of the both the establishment elite and the governing elite. And I'm talking about the establishment elite as being the people who control the government elite. I think all of these people have very little to do in their ordinary lives, not compared with ordinary people anyway. For example, they don't have to wash the car, wash the dishes, do the ironing, deal with laundry, cook meals, wash up, clean the oven, decorate their own house. None of that, or very little of it at least. And they are treated in a way which suggests that they are in some ways superior to ordinary people. And I think this is very dangerous. I think we're beginning to see just how dangerous it is as we see them behaving more as though they think they're gods. So I would like to make the recommendation that we start to equalize things a little bit. I think we can equalize things with taxes, for example. I think that the rich should not end up that much more wealthy. They should be more wealthy if they have achieved something and started their own business, etc. But they should not be excessively wealthy. It's very dangerous if they are. We should not allow them to fly around in private jets. That we can justify because they say that there is global warming, so they shouldn't be able to do that. There should not be VIP lounges in airports. That encourages the wealthy to think that they are something special. They should not be travelling by first-class transport. They shouldn't be in first-class carriages because there shouldn't be such things in trains. They should travel with ordinary people. There should be no expenses for MPs. It's ridiculous that they don't pay for their own food. They should start paying for their own food so that they know the problems that ordinary people have. And I think that if we introduce these things, it will ground these people. It will make them think like ordinary people, because I don't think there are as many paedophiles among ordinary people as there are among the governing elite and the establishment elite. In other words, stop the privileges for these people and you're going to restore their sense of humanity, because the depravity that we're seeing shows a complete lack of humanity. But I would like to suggest another reason why there are so many paedophiles, because there seem to be rather a lot of them in places like the BBC and in government. I've talked already about the establishment elite as being those who control what I'm calling the governing elite. Now, some years ago we had a scandal that took place which really was quite important in British society, and that was called the Profumo affair. And this was the story of a government minister who went to a prostitute called Christine Keeler, and Christine Keeler had also slept with a Russian spy, and it was considered that Profumo therefore was compromised. And people in Britain talked openly about the fact that it was wrong that politicians should be compromised. Well, that was being compromised because of having had extramarital sex with a prostitute. Now, that wouldn't shock us at all. But we've now arrived at the very last taboo, and that is paedophilia. That still is a taboo. So it would make sense for the establishment elite who control the government elite, it would make sense for them to ensure that the politicians they appointed are in some way compromised. And I think that may be another reason why we have so many politicians that have links to paedophilia or some sort of depraved sexual behaviour, not just in Britain but in America too. I'm not saying that all politicians, incidentally, are depraved, but I think there's a high proportion of them that are. The more depraved politicians are, the easier they're going to be for the establishment elite to control them. So now I'd very much like you to vote. If you agree with my recommendations, please press like. If you either don't agree with the recommendations, or if you don't care, or if you approve of paedophilia, please press dislike. And if you've got any more suggestions, any more ideas, I would love to hear from you, so please write a comment underneath the video. And by the way, I've put a link to Bill Maloney's video Sun, Sea and Satan in the More section underneath my video.
Your letter was only the start of it.